So let's talk about this. Yesterday, both the GSL as well as the ESL announced their plans for the upcoming competitive season of StarCraft 2. Just a couple of weeks ago, IEM Katowice wrapped up. We have a new StarCraft 2 world champion, but we didn't know what the plans for the upcoming year were going to be. And honestly, the announcements that were made yesterday, I actually think it may very well be the end for Korean StarCraft 2 as we knew it. Or I guess as we know it right now, because the guys are probably panicking over there and trying to decide what they should be doing with their lives. But anyways, let's talk about this for a little bit, okay? So in this video, I want to go over the announcements made by GSL. I want to go over the announcement made by ESL. And I also want to, well, look at the future and think about what's probably going to be coming up next. Before we go to those announcements, however, let's talk about how StarCraft 2 Esports has always been handled ever since the very first release of the game. So back in 2010, when Blizzard first released the game, Esports was obviously entirely different than it is right now. In general, it was much smaller, and Blizzard for a while managed to lead Esports with StarCraft 2 until inevitably games like, for example, League of Legends, and Dota, and CSGO, and all the rest of it came up, and Blizzard kind of lost their head start, right? Within Blizzard Entertainment itself as well, other games obviously were released, and those games also were pushed into the esports side of things. Titles like, for example, Hearthstone come to mind, but also, for example, Overwatch. Those games got a lot more priority, and it seemed that StarCraft 2 was put on the back burner. So initially, all of the premier tournaments back in the early days of StarCraft 2, the majority of them at the very least, they were handled by Blizzard directly. So they had an esports team that was basically handling all of it. There was a lot of money pumped into it because obviously it was a marketing opportunity and it would eventually sell them more boxes of StarCraft 2, and therefore it would hopefully pay for itself in the long run. Now, over the years, more and more of that control got outsourced. So when StarCraft 2 was first put on maintenance mode a couple of years ago, we learned that there was also a multi-year deal made with ESL, GSL, as well as DreamHack to continue running the StarCraft 2 esports scene. And just with IEM Katowice wrapping up, that was also the end for that multi-year deal. And obviously, people were already starting to get a little bit concerned because, well, normally those announcements for the upcoming season, they were made a little bit earlier than, well, just literally weeks after the previous season ended. Okay, so it turns out, and this seems to be the general gist of things, it turns out that Blizzard is taking another step back when it comes to StarCraft 2, and as far as I have gathered, they are no longer investing any money into it whatsoever. I'll get to that in a moment, but let's talk about the changes that GSL has announced first and foremost. So this is on Afrika TV, the website itself. They go over what the prize pool looks like, but one thing to... okay, there's a lot to unwrap, man. This whole situation kind of sucks. Let's talk about the prize pool first and foremost. So for each of the 3 GSL seasons, we'll have 34 million Korean won. This comes down to, in total, the 102 million Korean won. It comes down to about 72,000 euro in a year, or about $80,000. In the previous year, so last year, per season, per each of these seasons, there was 160 million Korean won on the line. So that was the equivalent of about 115,000 euro. Every season that we had last year at the GSL Code S, it had more prize pool than the entire year this time around combined. And this year, we don't have a GSL Super Tournament, it seems either. There's no mention of that. Normally, in between the seasons, there's a GSL Super Tournament. No mention of that whatsoever. It also mentions over here that there are 16 participants rather than what we've had over the last couple of years and roughly what they're aiming for. Now, luckily for us, on their YouTube channel, they also did post a little bit more information about exactly what to expect. So here's what they wrote. GSL, which started with 2010, the open season, is proudly celebrating its 14th anniversary, right? So there's going to be 3 regular GSL seasons, and they are making some significant changes to the format. The GSL League format has been changed from the round of 20 to the round of 16 this year, the former season. I think the former season is what they meant. However, this is the big one over here. GSL round of 16 to round of 8 will be played online, and only the round of 4 and the finals will be played on the offline stage. This basically means that the studio broadcast, as we've always known it, I mean, obviously, Artos has already moved away to Canada recently. But yeah, basically the GSL as we've always known it is changing significantly. So if you are making it into the top 16, right? So say you're making it into the top 16, you make 1 million Korean won. Let me have a look at how much exactly that is. To USD, 1 million Korean won to USD. That comes down to $765. So if you are anywhere between 9 and 16 for what is essentially 4 months of work, you would get compensated $764. In the past, some of these players could make a living out of, you know, being in top 16, but with numbers like this, that doesn't even cover a month's rent over in Korea, right? Like that isn't gonna allow you to make a living whatsoever, and obviously that's even pre-tax as well. So a significant portion of it. It's just a bit of a mess. Now, obviously, there are other tournaments running as well that the Koreans can participate in, like the international events. So the top dogs, right, the very best players, the ones that you see on my channel mentioned all the time, they will probably be fine because they also participate in weekly events from the ESL, and they also do very well in international events. So we'll get to those in a moment. Luckily, the ESL announcement is not nearly this grim. But this, honestly, is barely worthy of being called a premier tournament now. It's a very significant reduction, about 80% reduction in its funding overall, and obviously they're cutting the studio broadcast and all that as well. Yeah, it really kind of sucks. Like, obviously StarCraft 2 and esports, and I guess regular sports in general, are very, very top-heavy. But honestly, it's 750 bucks for 4 months is insane. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm very glad to see that GSL is continuing onwards, but honestly, this kind of feels like a farewell tour. Okay, so let's talk about the announcement made by ESL. And this one is a whole lot more positive. I'm honestly so disappointed by GSL. Like, I've been watching that show pretty much every day that it's been on for the last, well, 12, 13 years. It sucks. Anyways, so let's talk about the ESL Pro Tour. StarCraft 2 is shaping up for another incredible esports year as ESL reveals the ESL Pro Tour for 2023 and 2024. Okay, so we have a weekly ESL Open Cups. This is awesome. 2 online StarCraft 2 Master Regionals with live finals and the EPT Championship. Live ESL StarCraft 2 Masters Finals to take place at DreamHack Summer, as well as DreamHack Atlanta. Very excited to see Atlanta coming back once again, because the fans over in the United States were going absolutely wild. Yeah, that was a really fun event. The EPT StarCraft 2 Championships to be announced later this year as well. I think this is a reference to where the StarCraft 2 World Championships will likely be taking place. Now, this is the big one over here. ESL to take over the full funding, including prize money, of its StarCraft 2 esports ecosystem. I'm honestly impressed with what ESL has announced. It is... reading just the GSL announcement, you would imagine that they're also going to gut what they've been, you know, what they can work with this year. So GSL not only obviously, well, cut their studio, but also 80% of their prize pool and everything else. It's a very significant reduction. And I actually read the GSL announcement first before I read this one. I was like, oh my god, well, don't know what I'm going to be doing, but I guess we'll find out. Okay, here's what we know. Cologne/New York. The StarCraft 2 legacy continues as ESL today announced that the 2023-2024 for the ESL Pro Tour is featuring an ESL Weekly Cup, 2 online StarCraft 2 Masters Regionals, and a live EPT Championship. Okay. So during the ESL StarCraft 2 Masters, players worldwide duel in 1 of 4 online regional leagues to ultimately qualify for a spot in the live finals. So we have the StarCraft 2 Masters Summer. This is going to be taking place at DreamHack Jönköping, which takes place, sorry by the way, for all my Swedish viewers for my terrible pronunciation.
Jönköping.
Thank you, Google Translate. I was actually pretty close. So this is going to be taking place on June 16th to June 18th, featuring a $200,000 prize pool. Awesome. StarCraft 2 Masters Winter, finals to take place at DreamHack Atlanta, featuring a $200,000 prize pool. Very good. In order to give fans the opportunity to watch top players face off against each other on a more regular basis, the Latin America and the North American regions will be combined into the Americas region. So this is a pretty big change to the tournament format. While China, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau, Japan, Oceania, and the rest of Asia will be merged into the Asia region. Okay. I honestly think those changes are fair, even though it's going to suck for you know, some of the pro gamers in those regions. But if your goal is to create the most competitive StarCraft 2 season possible, yeah, it makes sense, right? To get the best players to compete against one another instead. It's going to suck for some people, but it is what it is. It's, yeah, I'm honestly not really too bothered by it. So the European, EU, and Korean KR operated by GSL regions continue like in preceding years. So the total prize pool is going to be at least $663,000, which includes the summer season, the winter season, 63K for the 53 weekly Open Cups, and then at least 200K as well for the EPT Championships to be announced later this year. They mention at least, so that reads to me as if they are aiming to, yeah, look for a little bit more. So to put this in perspective, last year we had a total prize pool of 1.2 million. So this is going to be at least 663,000, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to be getting closer to maybe 750,000 or whatever instead, right? We'll see where this ends up going. I'm honestly impressed with the amount of effort and you know, money that ESL is pouring into StarCraft 2. That really does warm my heart. I mean, I've been playing this game for a very long time. Absolutely love it. I've tried every other esport out there, but StarCraft 2 is just, at least in my opinion, the best. And it's good to see that ESL at the very least, to a certain extent, agrees with that as well. Is it going to be at Katowice again? Stay tuned for more details, including its location. It will be announced later this year. However, the prize pool level is at least guaranteed as well. Okay. Are there any third-party events like Home Story Cup and the Team Liquid Star League in the upcoming season? We're still happy to include those as well. Will there be new patches and balance updates and all that? We will continue supporting StarCraft 2 with some of the most talented pro gamers and passionate fans, blah, blah, blah. Our current plan is also to continue implementing the tournament map pool updates and balance changes from Blizzard Entertainment. Okay, so, long story short. ESL and GSL are continuing onwards. Obviously, they need to spend money now, a lot more money than they previously were spending. And especially on the Korean end of things, yeah, that is going to be a significant cut. There's no denying that StarCraft 1, in particular over in Korea, is more popular than StarCraft 2. And because of that, there's a lower viewership for the Korean StarCraft 2 tournaments, which kind of sucks. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of the main reasons as well why this upcoming season of GSL is quite a bit, yeah, quite a bit less. Okay, so here's the thing, though. Here's what bothers me about this whole situation, right? What bothers me from Blizzard's point of view is that it feels very short-sighted. They just announced, once again, record profits for Activision Blizzard King for the fourth quarter of 2022. Apparently, I just had a quick little look at their shareholders' website. They're currently holding a cash position of approximately 8.4 billion American dollars. I've ranted about this already at length over the last couple of years on stream, so apologies if you hear me talk about this again. But what bothers me is that in order to run a game like StarCraft 2 and occasionally release new content, how many developers do you really need? Right? Say you want to make a new co-op commander in StarCraft 2, say you want to add it into the game, you can maybe sell it for like 10 bucks, like, I don't know, people are more than willing to spend 10 bucks on it. You can sell probably at least 100,000 copies with a little bit of marketing. How many people do you really need to release like 3 or 4 commanders each year? And obviously, they could reuse assets that are already in the game. What bothers me is that you really don't need a very large group of developers at all. As a matter of fact, there are arcade games in StarCraft 2 available right now. The Chinese community has done some amazing work making their own custom co-op commanders that are fully playable, that work really, really well, and that Blizzard could sell for a lot of money if they wanted to. It's disappointing to me that that small investment that they would have to make is apparently no longer worth their while. It seems to me that over the last couple of years, unless a project at Blizzard Entertainment makes at least $1 billion, that's billion with a B, they are not going to bother. And I find that very short-sighted. Like, one of the reasons why mobile games, like for example Diablo Immortal, do so well is because of the fact that there were Diablo games before Diablo Immortal, right? It's premised on the previous games that were released in the past. I'm sure there will be a StarCraft mobile game at some point in the future, right? Because when you think about it, like if you want to sell the StarCraft IP, right, the intellectual property as a whole, right? Say you want to sell that to another company, it is worth at least $1 billion. Like there are a lot of people that have heard of the name StarCraft, and you could continue that goodwill. You could even break even with that goodwill if it's just a money problem by making some new content for, you know, a little bit of money. Like for a company of that size, it's just a tiny bit of money. So yeah, to see them abandoning the project entirely really frustrates me. All right, so we can only really speculate as to why Blizzard doesn't want to continue supporting the scene. First off, it's because it's probably not making enough money, even though it can definitely break even, at the very least maybe make a little bit of profit. Apparently that is not enough. But also there were significant announcements recently, especially in the Chinese region. From what I understand, the renewal of their NetEase deal was no longer going through, and because of that, Blizzard has pulled out of the Chinese market entirely, which is kind of ironic because the StarCraft 2 World Champion is literally a Chinese player. It boggles my mind. Anyways, I guess they are just cutting costs, right? They are just cutting costs because certain projects are not paying off as well as they were expected to once upon a time, and I guess spending a couple $1 million here and there is no longer a good idea. Happening with the Activision Blizzard King merger with Microsoft. So I can imagine that, maybe they're trying to just get their numbers to look as positive as possible until that merger ultimately goes through, or until it doesn't. It's kind of hard to say, but it really does kind of suck. All right, so what does this mean for me? I plan on continuing making StarCraft 2 content for the foreseeable future. I freaking love watching this game. I really enjoy casting this game as well. But I also want to continue doing what I do for hopefully many more years. And focusing exclusively on StarCraft 2 seems to just be a bad career choice. Obviously, I have my Twitch channel, I have my YouTube channel, I do a bunch of different projects here and there, so I'm not just dependent on StarCraft 2 by any stretch, but there's no denying that StarCraft 2 is a significant portion of what I do. I'm gonna continue doing StarCraft 2 content for as long as it's a smart thing for me to do. Hopefully for at least another full year at the very least, hopefully for longer than that as well. But I can imagine that, especially in the Korean region, right, for a lot of those guys, unless they're ready to go into like a side job, right, or maybe they want to become like a content creator and they want to start streaming or making YouTube videos themselves, whatever, right? For a lot of those guys, it's no longer going to be feasible for them to make a living. And yeah, it turns out pro gamers do need to eat. They do have rent to pay. They do have, you know, a life to live, right? So I can imagine there's going to be a reduction, especially on the Korean end of things. Now, the top-level players, they will likely continue playing because they will still do just fine, and maybe in their minds there's going to be less competition, so therefore it might be a little bit easier even for them as well. But yeah, I do want to continue casting their games for as long as I reasonably can. This all being said, to just end on a somewhat more positive note, in a way, this is laying down the red carpet for Stromgate. Stromgate is an upcoming RTS. Beta is supposed to start up sometime this year.
This is Command. Storm's in your way. Prepare for extraction.
Signal's breaking up. Command, I'll do one last scan. See you soon. Over. Okay, hurry. Now we're talking. Command, I may be onto something. Repeat, I have it. Mission accomplished.
Hang tight, Doc. I've got this.
Glad you could make it.
We gotta move. Now. There's a storm coming. And hell's coming with it.
I am very excited for it, and I really hope it can live up to the hype. Just on the off chance that you're unfamiliar, because I've talked about this quite a bit in previous videos, but basically everybody who worked on Warcraft 3 and StarCraft 2 and a bunch of other RTS games, all of the best guys, they're working at a new company called Frost Giant. They're working on a new game called Stormgate. Everybody's very excited for it. The announcements that they have made so far seem incredibly promising, but we obviously haven't seen the game yet, right? So I don't want to get too carried away with the hype, but I really do hope that it can live up to at least some of the expectations, because, yeah, I'm cautiously optimistic. Let's leave it at that. Anyways, that's pretty much it. We'll see where things go in the upcoming year of StarCraft 2. Very interested in hearing your thoughts, so let me know down below in the comment section. Thank you for watching.